slap to your side, a push on my foolish pride. I'm out of my mind. I'm down from the endless high. Don't know who's losing, who's bruising, who's choosing to stick it through. So we fight with fire.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the reboot of Secret Kelly Radio. We have a hot topic tonight. I have been watching this controversy for a while now, and I just haven't really weighed in because I've been so busy with my career and family life and things of that nature. I've talked about it, of course, on my Twitter because I'm very vocal on my Twitter, but I haven't really talked about it on my radio show or on YouTube or anything of that nature. So I thought I would touch on the topic tonight. I am going to try to be as respectful as possible tonight because I know feelings can be hurt pretty easily when talking about gender and how one identifies. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to invalidate anybody. That's not what this episode is about. However, I will be speaking about my experience as a trans woman, my experience of what it's like when I see trans women that are doing very well, speaking out for the trans community, being bullied and pushed aside because of their views or because of how they're speaking about their own gender identity. And unfortunately, it's been happening to quite a few prominent trans people on the internet, I guess on YouTube mostly, that I'm just really saddened by. I just haven't been paying attention, I guess, and then I'm just now paying attention to all of this. As you know, I transitioned when I was 12 years old. So when I grew up, there was no such thing as non-binary. This wasn't even a talking point. However, when I was doing activism, there were genderqueers. And at that time, genderqueers at the time were mostly lesbians that were fighting the patriarchy, fighting gender roles. But they weren't trying to say they weren't women or, they were just basically fighting against the patriarchy in general. It kind of just has gone from that to what it is now. So genderqueer was a thing in the 90s when I was mostly doing a lot of activism, and in the early 2000s when I was doing a lot of activism, like on the front lines, on boards, pride boards and other LGBT activist boards that I served on. So yeah, I didn't know about genderqueer, and obviously I knew about Kate and other activists that were genderqueer, basically. Basically, mostly Kate Bornstein, I think it's Bornstein or Bornstein. I really didn't pay much attention to her, but at the time, I have to be completely honest with you, because I didn't identify as a queer person. I didn't identify with a lot of her talking points, so I didn't really recognize her as a voice for me or as a person I wanted to listen to on trans issues. But she was influential for many people, from lesbians to trans community, and here in between. But obviously genderqueer, and now it's non-binary, has kind of taken over the transgender talking points from what I can tell. Which is not problematic per se, because I don't feel like them being non-binary invalidates me as a trans woman, especially because my day-to-day life is pretty much, I don't deal with being trans in my day-to-day life, to be quite honest with you, unless I'm online doing my work, because my work obviously has me outed as a trans woman because I'm a former trans porn star, and trans cam model, and so my life revolves around the fantasy of trans. So that's when I mostly deal with trans issues. However, um, I do think it's important to say that this does affect other trans women, where it does affect them daily, and it does get confusing for a lot of my friends when I speak to them on trans issues, and they're confused that, they think that trans women per se want to go against, want to make a third gender, or want to erase gender, and the list goes on. And from what I know, being a trans woman for many, 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 many years, I'm 37 now, I started at 12. The majority of transsexual women and transsexual men, transgender is an umbrella term, as I said today on my Twitter, and transsexual, means that you actually go through the process, and you're actually like getting on hormones, and you're taking the steps to actually become either man or woman, going from one gender to the other. But now it's kind of been clouded in a way for a lot of people, because now the non-binaries have found their voice, which is great, and they are speaking on their views of what gender is, and their views of what their gender identity is, and their views of how life should be for them to be happy, which is fine, which is great. However, what they have been tending to do, which is my problem, the reason I'm doing this tonight, is what I'm finding that they're doing is they're invalidating a lot of trans voices and calling them true scum, calling us problematic. I mean, you have people like Buck Angel being vilified, who has been a pioneer on trans rights and trans activism from a very early on in his career. You have ContraPoints now being canceled because she had association with Buck Angel. So they basically canceled her because of the fact that she had like 12 seconds of him in a video playing John Waters in one of her really awesome informative videos on opulence. But because the non-binary find Buck Angel problematic, they basically canceled her, and they bullied her, and they've basically silenced her because of the fact that they just don't agree with Buck Angel and his views on what trans is. And, again, gender is, it varies. Everyone, it's a spectrum. However, you have to let each person say what they feel and how they feel about themselves. And I think for a lot of transsexuals, they want people to know that they're not trying to do a gender war, and they're not trying to make a third gender, and they're not, most of us don't feel like people are transphobic because they don't want to sleep with us. That's what I think a lot of transsexual people are trying to convey. And NBs, what they hear is that they are being invalidated by us because we feel this way. And they're basically saying, if you don't get on board with our messaging, we'll cancel you. We'll bully you. We're going to call you true scum. We're going to kick you out of your community because you aren't on board with our messaging. And I have a problem with that because of the fact I fought many, many years to be who I am and be respected as who I am. And I fought for others to be respected for who they are. And just like I want NB people to be respected for who they are, but I want them to have their own voice and have their own stories and have their own dialogue, and not steal ours, or not step on ours, I should say. And that's my big issue with the NB crowd. And I will apologize. Some of my earlier tweets in the past have been very, I would I would say non-binary phobic, because I didn't really understand where they were coming from, and all I saw was a bunch of attacks from the non-binary and overstepping on trans voices. So of course it came from a place of anger. But I was listening to my friend Tiffany Starr, who is a trans porn star, fellow trans porn star, um, sent me a video of Vosh. I think his name's Vosh. And I watched some of his videos, and it did educate me a little bit on what they're trying to do, and it gave me more perspective. But I think Vosh greatly ignores the many extreme, very extreme non-binary or NB activists and SJWs. He tries to say that they don't invalidate trans, and they don't try to say that they don't try to say that transsexuals, they allow us to have our own voice, and maybe many do, I'll give them that, but there are many that don't, and you can see that right now, because he's even made a video about how ContraPoints was basically kicked off YouTube because this crowd, she can't take all the bullying from NBs. It's so controversial, and I think it's funny that they have this argument that, the reason why you're trans, you're true scum is because you're saying that me being an NB invalidates you, and you're against us, and, the list goes on. And I'm not against NB people, but I am against them stepping over my voice and how I feel about who I am as a trans woman and how I validate myself. Which is what they're complaining about, is what they're doing to us, to trans women, to trans men. That's what they're doing. They're doing that to us. So what they're complaining about, they're kind of hypocritical, because they're doing exactly what they're accusing us of doing. They are saying that if you're not on my agenda, this gender war, and fighting the patriarchy, and the list goes on, then you are the enemy, is basically what they're saying. Now, I don't agree with a lot of things that I've seen, like even myself. I apologize for how I've reacted to NBs, and I will not be doing that going forward. But I want you to allow me to have my voice too, and I'll allow you to have your voice. But I don't agree with we need to eradicate NBs. I don't think that we need to attack NBs per se, unless they're stepping on our coattails or they're stepping on our voices, obviously. But I think we could work together to make sure that trans women and men's voices are heard and how they feel. And NBs are, obviously they can feel how they feel. Their voices are very microphoned right now. I mean, even like I was watching, I just came across another YouTuber who is a lesbian, and one of my best friends is a lesbian. And she talks about this all the time too. So I kind of related to hearing her talk about her experience of being called transphobic by the trans community. And her name is, let me remember her name, because I just started listening to her today and I'm horrible with names. Ariel Scarcell. And she's a really prominent YouTuber, and she speaks on a whole bunch of issues, but she's been called transphobic because she's only into, from what I've seen on her YouTube, she's only into women with vaginas or trans women that are feminine and have gone through the surgery, that she could probably date someone like that, she said. And that's fine. I don't think that sexual attraction should ever be up for debate or ever be attacked, because we all have different sexual attractions and what we're okay with and what we aren't okay with, and we're all allowed to identify how we want to identify. That's the whole point of being transgender, right? We're all supposed to be able to identify how we want to identify, and that's the NB's argument, right? You guys want to identify how you want to identify. You don't want to identify as man or woman. You want to be something in between, or just erase the patriarchy. list goes on, um, which is fine. But I don't like that I keep on seeing trans women that are into women, which are lesbians, um, attacking other lesbians who aren't okay with trans women that still have their penis, and basically arguing that they have trauma or they, need to get over themselves and they need to rethink things, or list goes on. It just reminds me of how many men have said that to so many of my lipstick lesbian friends that are very pretty, but they're totally lesbians, and they're all like, you just need the good dicking, or you just need the right man, or you just need this, or you have you been hurt by other men? Is that why you're a lesbian? That's basically sounding so misogynist, that they're arguing. I just don't understand how how that's even transphobic, or how it even comes off transphobic. And I'm sorry, somebody might be able to explain it in their perspective on Twitter, but I am not down for this whole calling people transphobic because they're not into me as a trans woman, or they're not into somebody because they have a different sexual organ that they would normally be into. The reason a lesbian is because she's into vagina, and that's what makes her a lesbian. She's into women. The reason I consider myself hetero is because I prefer dating men and I like penis, and that's just my MO. Am I woman phobic because I won't date a woman? No. It's because my sexual attraction is for men, just like this woman's, Ariel, is for women and post-op women. So, but there's some lesbians that will never be into post-op women even. They want a cis woman only, and that's fine. Cis are going to prefer cis, and that is totally 100% fine. I don't think we need to start attacking sexuality. This is what we've been arguing with the conservatives for years. Like, we're not supposed to attack people's sexuality. Gays, love is love who you want to, yada, 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 yada. And now this extreme left is becoming so problematic with their transphobic politics. I don't understand. Like, did I go to bed and woke up to like some crazy nightmare of like, I just don't remember trans women and men ever arguing for this. And another problem I have is that there's so many cis people that are speaking out for the trans community. And I don't mind that they're allies, and I don't mind that they're speaking out, of course. However, when a trans woman or a trans man is telling you that is not how we feel, you need to step back. You don't need to push back. You don't need to argue. That is not your place. It's not. And that's another thing I find problematic about this Vosh person, even though I like a lot of his content. Vosh, to me, is very problematic in many ways. It's because he has his point of view, and then his point of view is the only one that matters. And he doesn't have any empathy for anyone else's side. And I do have empathy for other people's side. And that's why I'm trying to be very respectful to NBs. Even though I don't understand it, I'm still very empathetic, and I want everyone to be accepted for who they are, of course. But I can tell you that I don't feel like I have anything in common with an NB person, because I don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to start a gender war with so-and-so. I want to be respected as a woman. I want to live as a woman. I don't question my womanhood. I don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, today I'm going to start a war online with a cis person and say, you have to get rid of the patriarchy and get rid of this and that and the other. I don't ever think of that. And I don't ever second guess my womanhood. I don't ever think about gender really in my personal life. I just think, this is my life and this is who I am, and I wake up and I do my normal daily thing, and the list goes on. Um, so, but when I see like these NBs, extreme NBs, I'm going to keep on saying extreme NBs because not all NBs are like this. I don't want to broad stroke all of them because I've watched many NB videos today on this topic who had very sane arguments and were totally respectful of trans women and trans men. So you can't say all of them are bad. And they're totally aware that they're not like trans women, they're not like trans men. So those NBAs to me are, great. But then you have other NBs that are more extreme that are trying to basically erase trans voices and any voice that disagrees with them. And they're even trying to erase sexuality. And this is why you see LGBT people or LGBT, well, even T, because like people like myself and others, Buck Angel, are trying to avoid NBs, are trying to get rid of them. No, I'm not saying I'm not trying to, but I'm saying at a time I was like that because I didn't really understand them and I felt like they were just being rude and obnoxious and stepping over trans voices. And when I wanted to get back into activism, all the talking points were non-binary talking points. And when I said to them, I don't know about non-binary, I'm not a non-binary person, and my talking points is going to stay trans talking points because I know about being a trans woman and I can help there. And they basically said, this is not the agenda anymore. You need to get on board or we can't have you as an activist. So I took my leave. I said, okay, that's fine. I'm just not comfortable speaking on these issues because I don't talk about things I'm not comfortable with speaking about. I shouldn't. Because I don't know internally how an NB person feels, and it's not my place to speak for them. I can be an ally, but I don't need to speak for them. And I don't feel like NB people should be speaking for trans women and trans men because they're not transsexuals. They don't know how we feel inside. Obviously, if they don't have gender dysphoria, they don't have the need to transition. They don't have the need to shave their face. They don't have the need to transition at all, but want to be seen as XYZ. I'm telling you, most trans women would have an issue with having a beard. Most trans women would have an issue with looking like a male. Like they even like the most unpassable trans women, they try as hard as they can to pass because they want to be respected as a woman. So they will go out of their way. They'll put heavy makeup on. They'll do beard cover. They'll do as much as they can to look female, and that's unpassable to passable. I'm talking about unpassable trans women, and I don't think that NBs are very empathetic. Many NBs are very empathetic to that, and why I'm very empathetic to NBs, and I understand what their war is. And I was listening to a past frenemy, I guess you'd call her, not really a frenemy, but because I don't dislike her, I really don't think about her. Cat Black. I was watching a video of her because I always like to see what her perspective is because we kind of differ on many things, but we agree on some. I liked what she had to say on the fact that hormones should be more accessible, and that's what NB want to have happen. And I agree that hormones should be more acceptable, especially for an adult. Doctors and healthcare should be much better for trans women, so they don't have to escort to get those type of things. Because many trans women do have to escort, or used to have to escort to get those kind of things until the Affordable Care Act made it possible for trans women to get, insurance, and it would cover their hormones, it would cover their surgeries, it would cover certain things of transitioning, especially Blue Cross and Blue Shield and other insurance providers. So I did agree with her there. However, I do still think that gender counseling, counseling is so important for your transformation, especially if you're going to go post-op. And I really do think that that's very important because once you go post-op, there's not really any going back, and you really need to be sure of what you're doing and who you are. And I don't think everything should be so easily acceptable or accessible. I'm sorry, accessible. So I do differentiate with her there, and I do differentiate with the NBs there. But I do understand what they're saying, that certain things should be more accessible, like hormones and healthcare, and things of that nature. Because the reason why a lot of trans women escort and do sex work is because they're trying to finance their transition, either through hormones or laser or boob jobs and face surgeries and downstairs surgery, and the list goes on. So if insurance covered a lot of that, there'd be a lot less money on the trans woman, and she probably wouldn't have to do as much sex work, if at all. So that does help out the trans community in a great way. So I do agree with Kat Black there, and I can see her argument, but I at the same time don't agree that you shouldn't have any counseling and you shouldn't have any kind of therapy on who you are as a trans person, especially if you're going to go get the surgery. And I do think, in my opinion, that the counseling should be a lot longer than 2 years, and you should have to live longer than 2 years as a trans woman to go and get your surgery. That's just me. I think it should be maybe even 4 years, because it's such a change that you can't even go back. So once you do it, you're done. There's no going back. So I really do think, because I have many friends that have done it and they thought they were totally gung-ho for it, and their opinions changed after. And these aren't unpassable trans girls, and these are not girls that didn't live as trans women for a long time. These are girls that lived a very long time as trans. So I think the experience is different for everyone, but I do think that counseling is definitely needed for gender reassignment surgery. Now, hormones, that's a different story, because you can stop taking your hormones and typically you go right back to looking, male after a few years. You can even take testosterone and other things to help combat any kind of hormone therapy that you did. So, yeah. Okay, so let's get back on topic, because I was kind of going on a tangent there. What I find too is that a lot of times both sides vilify each other. And if it's not the trans women and vilify the trans people and vilifying NBs, and NBs are vilifying trans people, call it as true scum. And I think transmeticists or something like that. I can't remember. It's something of that nature. I wasn't really paying attention. It's just so silly to me. Now, to be able to go to high school and as a trans woman or a trans girl, I had to go through many evaluations because when I transitioned, it was in the 90s. And so the school is trying to do everything in the book to try to prevent me from going to high school as a girl. So they were sending me to counselor after counselor after counselor. I think I went to 5 different counselors, and each of them came back. She's trans. She's not crazy. She's sane. This is who she is. Then the list goes on. So they couldn't really argue it. So they were kind of forced into allowing me to live my life as the way I wanted, especially after we got a trans advocate in there who basically fought with me to be able to go to school as a girl. And that's how I got into activism, because they were like, well, you were basically doing this on your own, so you should probably get in, if you can lend your voice, if you're not scared to, would you like to? And I did. And I did it for many years and helped girls and guys be able to go to their proms with the same sex. I helped other trans girls go to school as their authentic selves. And then I got into fighting for marriage equality. I got into fighting for trans rights, and the list goes on. And I did that for many, 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 many years, because a lot of people think I've been in porn for many, many, many years, which I have, but I didn't start trans porn until I was 26. So from before that, I was like the sweetheart, doing trans activism, living a very normal, everyday life. So I had a whole life before porn, and a lot of people don't realize that. But at the time when I joined porn, the LGBTQ activist movement was a lot more conservative, especially when it came to sex work and things of that nature. So they were kind of like, when I joined the industry, they were like, okay, we're done with her. You got to get out. And they've apologized about it since, but at the time they were like, get out. We don't want you. So, but times change, and our thoughts change, but we keep on having these same arguments over and over and over again, from slavery to interracial couples to segregation, women's voting, gay rights, gay marriage. The list goes on. We just keep on arguing the same things. What really annoys me is when I see LGBT people turning against trans people because of these extreme voices getting so much clout. And they are. BuzzFeed, mainstream media is all picking up their very extreme voices and barely ever picking up a voice that is like mine, or dare I say it, Blair White's, because a lot of people find her problematic. But at the end of the day, Blair White is a trans woman, and she has every right to feel how she feels, and she doesn't need to say everything that we need, everything I believe in, just like I don't need to say everything you believe in. We all have voices. Our voices matter, and we all have lived different experiences, we're all living different journeys, and we all identify differently. And we all have our gender dysphoria is different. Some people have worse gender dysphoria than others. So, but it's not my place to silence Blair. It's not your place to silence Blair. Just like it's not my place to silence NBs. But it is my place to say, hey, I have a voice too. You need to hear me out, and I can speak respectfully. If you can, treat me with respect, I'll treat you with respect. That is my place, and I deserve every right to speak out for how I feel, just like they deserve every right to speak out for how they feel. But when you start silencing voices like mine, Blair's, the list goes on, Ariel's, Carcella's, ContraPoint's, whoever, it's becoming cultish, because then you're saying no one else matters but our voice, and you're bullying that person. Some that have substance issues, and you guys know she's got a substance. You guys know ContraPoints has substance issues, and her voice has opened so many minds. So many minds. I've seen it from very right-wing people that were Ben Shapiro fans that changed their minds. That's powerful. And she doesn't deserve to be canceled. She doesn't deserve to be bullied. She can feel how she feels. And I get what she's saying, that how she felt because her gender dysphoria was kicking in, how she felt when she was in a very woke place and they're asking for, what are your pronouns? And I find that kind of silly. I do, and I shouldn't say that, because I understand that the reason why we need to ask pronouns is because many non-binaries look very cis, so that's why we have to ask pronouns. But for passing trans women, when we go out in everyday life, no one serves us. They're going to say ma'am. We're not questioned. So when you go to these events, like I've gone to many of these events actually. I've gone to Woodhall and things of that nature where you have to make a sign and you put your name, like a name tag, and it says these are the pronouns I use, and you put your name on there so that people can read your name tag and realize that you use she, her. List goes on, which is a lot easier than asking somebody. So yeah, at least you can have it on your name tag. It's not like it's not spoken. It's not questioned. So you don't feel like you're being misgendered at all. It's not affecting you at all, because people can easily read what it says on your name tag, and they can just simply say, okay, she, her, and then I can say they, them, their, whatever, people prefer to be, whatever pronouns they prefer. And I respect everybody's pronouns. You can call yourself whatever you want, and I will respect that, because I want people to respect my pronouns. So why won't I want to respect your pronouns? So, however, I think the issue is that not everyone's going to do that. And yeah, it can be problematic, but you can't force people to respect you. And that's just life. Not everyone's going to respect you. And I think that many times the trans community, especially the SJW crowd, are very sensitive, and they make everything an issue when it doesn't need to be an issue. Sometimes you have to ignore people. You just got to ignore them. That's been my experience. When I transitioned at 12, I reacted to every single thing a person said about me in high school when I was in freshman year. There would have been fights every day. I don't have time for that. And honestly, because I stood up for who I was without becoming volatile, without letting it bother me, by the time I was in sophomore year, people were like, okay, this is who she is, and my life kind of went on, and it was normal, and it wasn't even an issue anymore. It was kind of like those first few months of people just getting used to it, and I think they wanted me to be problematic. I think they wanted me to be combative. I think they wanted that. They wanted a reaction, and the more reaction I would have given them, the more it would have pissed them off, and the more it would have made them want to oppress me, and the more they would want to try to harm me. And because I didn't, I really feel like that helped me greatly in my high school experience. Because I was cool as a cucumber. Because I didn't care if they validated me or not. Because I validated me. I made myself happy. I was living the life I wanted to live. I was finally living as Kelly. I was finally being accepted by my parents and my friends, and that meant more to me than any bully at school or anybody else. And I think people need to remember that. We've put so much weight on the people that don't support us rather than focusing on the people that do support us and giving them the credit they deserve. And just having a great mindset about ourselves. And I don't think one group tips it over for another group. That's another thing. Obviously I have dealt with, and I have heard from my cis friends about how they're confused, and they're like, well, I never heard about you wanting to start a gender war. I never thought you wanted to do anything like this. What is this new trans movement? And it's because I never did. But I had to tell them, well, that's mostly the NBs. It's the non-binary movement, how they feel. And, you know, sorry, my husband is texting me during my radio show. 1 second. He's probably asking me about Chinese. So basically, they have both sides are basically telling each other, "You're making us look bad. You're making us look horrible," and both sides thinks that they're opening minds. You know, Blair White thinks her way is right. Vosh thinks his way is right. Ariel Scarcella thinks her way is right. I think my way is right. You know, the list goes on. We all think our way is right. Everyone. You know, we all have different, you know, perspectives, although I would agree that mine is more in tune with Ariel's and Blair's, even though she's a conservative. In many ways, I do agree with a lot of what they have to say, like the whole transphobic thing. I don't agree with that. I'm never going to agree with that. I don't think people should ever attack anyone's sexuality at all. That is not up for debate. I don't agree with that. I don't think that you have the right to tell somebody who they're attracted to, who they're not attracted to. And it doesn't make them any less more relevant or any less, or make them transphobic or, you know, like, I think that's just the whole thing, the whole narrative is just stupid and it just comes off desperate. And it comes off very predator-like in many ways, especially when I hear some of the talking points that I've heard from, I think it's Riley Dennison, who was saying, like, you know, lesbians have trauma because they don't want to have sex with a trans woman that has a penis. That to me is just that when I heard that today, I was just like, whoa, no way. That's just, I can't get down with that at all. So, 1 second. What I have another issue with is, again, cis people speaking up for us. I think Vosh does a really great job at getting his point across. And I think he does a great job at speaking out for NB issues and whatnot. But I think a lot of times he too invalidates actual trans women and actual, I don't say actual because that's rude. I want to say he invalidates transsexual women and transsexual men many times of how we feel. And I don't think that he realizes that. At least I don't think he does. He might, but I don't think he does. But when I've watched many of his videos ever since Tiffany's told me, and I can get down with a lot of it. And then other times I'm just like, okay, you are totally stepping on trans voices for your own agenda, because he's obviously, his agenda is to get rid of the spectrum. He wants to get rid of the pronouns. He wants to get rid of the binary. He believes that gender is a spectrum, and the many, I don't know how many genders is that. I've heard, you know, different numbers of gender, 99 to thousands of different genders, and the list goes on. And he also thinks that someone like him, which you can look him up, his name is Vosh, and let me see, give you the correct spelling so you can see what he looks like. Vaush. He thinks someone like him, that looks like him, which is basically a cis man, should be able to go into a woman's bathroom if they identify as a female. Now, I totally disagree with that, because that's just extreme. That's just extreme because Vosh looks like, I don't know. To me, he looks like Joe. Like, let me think of who's that? Who's that fat guy from Road Trip? Not Road Trip. Who's that comedy actor? One second. To me, he looks like Zach Galifianakis. That's his name. Sorry, I'm horrible with a lot of actors. To me, he looks like Zach Galifianakis with glasses on. Now, I'm sorry, if he walked into the ladies' room, I would be a little perturbed or a little freaked out because of the fact that, I mean, it's a cis man. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be like, oh, what do you identify as? It's just not reality. I would hope that they would choose to use the boys' restroom than using the female restroom. But when he said that, I just found that very extreme. I just don't think that helps out unpassing trans women at all, because the fact that most, like I said, most unpassing trans women, they do put effort in. They shave their face, they put makeup on, they put dresses on, they try to look as feminine as possible. They're trying as hard as they can. They're not walking in like a cis man to the bathroom. And I've worked with many, 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 many trans people over the years, speaking at events, through activism and things of that nature. And I've met many beautiful trans women. I've met many unpassable trans women. And not once have I met a trans woman that, unpassable as it could be, look like him in a dress. Ever. So they at least put effort in. They put makeup on. They put on the best presentation they could to present their gender. So I have a big issue when non-binaries will sit there and be like, this is to help unpassable trans women. I'm like, no, you're not helping unpassable trans women. What you're doing is making them a spectacle and a joke, in my opinion, because of the fact that you're saying, oh yeah, me, who looks like Zach Galifianakis, can walk into the ladies' room and I'll just say I'm a female and that's fine. And that's basically a conservative talking point, and they love these talking points and they use them in their, like Ben Shapiro and that gay guy that speaks out against trans people all the time, Milo, that's his name. He totally uses those images to scare cis conservative people. Oh, look who's trying to use the bathroom with you. So yeah, I do find that problematic, and I'm not going to apologize for that. It's very problematic that you're trying to do that. But other than that, he did, I want to say, as a positives, Vosh did teach me a lot about the non-binary movement, what non-binaries are trying to do, because like what I've seen from the non-binary movement is only the extreme version. And those are the ones I have an issue with because they're basically trying to cover up trans voices, kick them out, as we've seen with ContraPoints, as we've seen with Buck Angel, as we've seen with many trans activists that are on the non-binary gender war crusade. And I find that very problematic. And I understand why a lot of people want to cancel Blair White because obviously I too don't understand log cabin Republicans. I don't understand people that will vote against their selves, their rights, especially right now when the Trump administration keeps on trying to roll back LGBTQ rights, you know, taking sexual identity out of, just recently taking sexual identity out of discriminatory protection. And now the Supreme Court's going to be looking in on this in the next term. I think it's in October they're going to be looking in on it and deciding when we have a right-leaning court, which is just scary. So I'm always confused by trans women like her because I know she feels how she feels because in everyday life, Blair passes. She most definitely passes. So she probably doesn't think this affects her because that's how a lot of trans women feel that are conservative. They're like, well, I pass in everyday life. Who cares? You know, this doesn't affect me. I'm under the radar. But it affects many of their sisters and their brothers who have to also live in America and also have to have these rights to protect them. Just because it doesn't affect you, you also need to think of other people. So I totally get why people are like, Blair is the enemy. However, there are some things that she says that are not so controversial. There's some things that she says that aren't so horrible that I do agree with. And I think she has every right to state her opinion, though I think it's very Milo-esque because I feel like Milo and her are kind of very similar. They make their coin off conservatives. So conservatives love these talking points and love pointing at these people like Milo and Blair and say, oh, look at these LGBT people or GT people that are standing up for us and they understand they're not problematic like you people, you know. And they use Blair as their beacon of like, see, we're not transphobic. Look, we like Blair. And while everyone else is, you know, they dunk on everyone else. But I think what they would find is a lot of trans women actually feel how Blair feels in many ways, as far as the non-binary movement goes, and as far as being true scum, I guess is what you call it. But a lot of them have that as kitchen table talk, and they would never say that publicly because they don't want NBs and society to go after them, because now to not be bullied or canceled, you have to be on board with the NB movement. And I think you can be on board without totally being indoctrinated. Like I'm on board of them having their voice and speaking out and having their rights and all that stuff. However, I'm not on board of gender war. I'm not on board of erasing women and men because I'm a woman and I see myself as a woman and I don't want to be invalidated. Just like they don't want to be invalidated. So you can be, you know, non-binary. Great. You don't want to identify as either. So why do you need to invalidate another gender or another person? You go be non-binary, live your life, be happy, and leave others alone. I don't understand that. I will respect you. I will call you whatever you want to be called. I will let you live your life how you want to live it, and that's great. But I don't think that you need to attack men and women and lesbians and gays and trans who don't subscribe to your views. And I just think that's the problem. And there's no compromise. I don't see any compromise on the NB side. They're like our way or the highway. And you see that now with them canceling ContraPoints and others. And I'm sure if another big YouTuber besides Blair White didn't have all her conservative fans, she would have been canceled a long time ago too. So it's mostly the left eating their own kind because, in general, ContraPoints is the left side of Blair as far as like political views and her being down with the non-binary people, and the list goes on. And Blair is obviously the opposite, but they're treating her like she is Blair White, and so they canceled her, and she had to she basically had to like quit Twitter, and she doesn't upload her YouTube anymore, when she did really great videos from what I saw. And it's just pathetic that we're eating our own kind just because she said a few things about how she felt and how she is friends with a person that they don't like. It's disgusting. And you're no better than any conservative that pushes you out because of how you feel. You're no better than what they do. What you're doing right now is the same thing that conservatives and the Trump administration are trying to do to trans people. You're just no better. So I don't understand how you feel like you're leading the moral high ground by these actions. So, yeah. So I guess that's it, because I don't want to get too dicey. I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all. My stance is I stand with non-binary people as far as their voice goes, and I stand with what they believe in for themselves, and I stand for them being validated as humans, as we all deserve to be. However, do not step on my voice, do not step on any other trans woman's voice or trans man's voice, and let us have our opinion too, without calling us true scum, and the list goes on, because we are different. We are different. And if you can't see that, then that's your problem, not ours. Because being transsexual is different than transgender. Because I can tell you, sweetie, I would never, ever be comfortable walking on the street with a beard. I would never, ever be comfortable without having my surgeries done or getting on hormones, and the list goes on. I would just not feel comfortable with myself. And that was part of me becoming a woman, is looking in the mirror and seeing the woman that I am. And when I look in the mirror now, I see the woman I am. And that makes me happy because, my brain is matching my outside. So, just like I don't want to invalidate you. But just realize that trans women by far go through a lot more, especially trans women of color. And they're misgendered all the time. They are beaten. They're killed at an excruciating rate. And I think many of you, with your soap opera, I don't want to call it soap opera, I don't want to invalidate it. I want to say, I think many of you have a lot of, compared to them, it's petty. What you guys get mad about, compared to what a lot of trans women go through. What you attack people for being transphobic for, what you attack society for being wrong about, is just petty. And I think that your movement can do a lot more about being open to hearing constructive criticism and being respectful than being so extreme, because it's very cultish. It comes off very cultish. I feel like many non-binaries are like Scientologists, where if you don't agree with them, they're going to attack you and ruin your life and bully you. And that's how it's coming off. NBs are coming off very Scientologist like. Like I just was watching that show with that actress. Is her name Lena? Can't think of it. Let me look it up. Don't want to be wrong because I haven't really watched it that much. Leah Remini, that's her name. How NBs act towards people who don't agree with them is very similar to how I would guess that Scientologists treat their people. So it's very indoctrinating and it's very cultish like. And I hope you guys stop that because it's just hurting your cause, I think. It's causing conflict between trans people and non-binaries. It's causing conflict with LGBT and trans people. It's causing conflict with cis people and trans people. And I think there's a lot of good voices in the NB, and I hope you guys uplift those voices rather than the extreme voices. And that's speaking out to BuzzFeed and any other media publications that pick up these extreme NB people that are saying it's our way or the highway. I hope that you would validate other NB voices and as well as other trans voices that maybe that you don't find problematic because you guys find Blair White's problematic. I would hope that you would validate other trans voices that are more sane in your opinion because they're more leftist, I guess, on how they feel about themselves. Not saying me, I'm saying anybody. There's many trans voices out there that need to be validated, that speak out every day, that are not getting any limelight. And if they do get limelight, it's because they are doing the GLAAD and HRC talking points, which is mostly non-binary talking points, because I got all the talking points when I was trying to get back into activism, and it's all basically that. So, yeah. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you guys next week. Talk to you later.